This is the thing I miss very much is doing yoga because I can't like extreme bend or contort my body yet.
I can't control my body yet.
Well, no, I do a lot of yoga.
I'm just teasing. I charge my body.
I miss the stretch that you get only from doing certain moves in yoga, where it's like a deep stretch, all the things.
Deep.
Craving it. I haven't been able to take a bath, you guys. I haven't taken a bath in 5 weeks. And last night I almost did, and I forgot that I'm not allowed to. There's so many things.
Because of the getting up and getting down and.
No, just all your incision spots have to be completely healed.
Yeah, to make sure that everything in there is.
Shall we crack in?
Shall we? 1, 2, 3.
Ooh, that was not quite
It is
insane,
not.
but
I mean, nothing to write home about.
that slurping was to write home about.
Oh, that was good. Blackberry, good choice.
Ooh.
That was a what?
A little pinching sound.
I don't know. It goes down the wrong pipe all the time. We'll get up, find out.
I've never seen anyone
I
struggle
took my own
so
spit.
much with their own saliva.
My face I took in my own spit, and I'm almost hurled during one of those
Struggling.
stations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wowzers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you create more saliva than most people?
No, I think I swallowed down the wrong pipe. It was at the pickle juice station. I had a little pickle juice, and I literally coughed for. I hacked for like a quarter mile.
You might have to explain that. I was at the pickle juice station.
I ran a half marathon from Elnaka, and every mile there's yummy snacks.
Yeah.
And we sampled every
Pickle juice
single one.
doesn't sound like a yummy snack.
Oh,
to
But that's
me.
good if you're crampy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is. The salt.
Mm-hmm.
Good lord.
A little pickle and a little shot of juice. Delicious.
That is wild. That is
So it
something
went- it
only
went down-
runners would understand.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just it's a fun race where there's snacks at every mile.
That is
And I had
wild.
Well, it's not true. I didn't have the cookie snack and I didn't have the maple syrup shot because the last 2 miles I felt pukey, so I was sad about that. But I knew I'd reached my limit.
At least if you puked maple syrup, it wouldn't taste that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might taste
But
good.
it might
coming
bring
up.
up the pickle juice.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What
Well,
are we
we
doing
can say
today? Amber Darling.
Amber darling. So it's so interesting. It kind of
It
plays
is
out.
so interesting.
It is. What are we
Well,
talking
it's
about?
kind of like the theme that we were talking about. It's weird how what's interesting is how we come and sit down. We don't really share unless we need each other to think about things, and we kind of surprise each other. And almost always
Our topics
our
overlap.
topics kind of overlap.
It's very true.
It's kind of cool.
I like that.
I like it a lot.
We're
too.
synergized.
We're symbiotic. I don't even know.
Are you like a whale and the little things that eat on the whale? Symbiotic? Okay.
Oh, am I the whale or am I the
No.
barnacle?
That's not even the right word.
Okay.
I don't mind being a whale.
Remember?
Probably am.
Okay. So I'm gonna just stop you talking. Okay. So what I want to talk about.
Cheers.
Cheers! I know. So everybody be ridiculous and make my life miserable. All right. So what I want to talk about is our story, our internal narrative.
Okay.
What is that, and how does it creep up into our lives? And then probably we'll make this a 2-parter, I'm guessing. And how do we change our story? So something that's really interesting is I keep living my life and I keep having hard conversations or disagreements or butting heads with somebody or triggered by something. It feels like it's one thing. Like it feels like, oh, I'm mad about this. But as I peel it back, it always comes back to my story. And
The narrative.
yeah. My narrative. Story, narrative, those are kind of interchangeable. So in psychology, the theory of narrative identity suggests that as human beings, we form a life story, a narrative, to make sense of what we've experienced. Your inner narrative consists of 3 things: your reconstructed past, your perceived present, and your imagined future.
Wow.
So I just thought we should just...
That sums up my normal day.
Yeah, isn't it wild?
Yeah.
But as you start seeing it, which I find fascinating, is that you learn as you start understanding and identifying your story. And it does take time, so it's not like at the end of this, but I know mine because I've been in therapy for years. So mine is I am unwanted and unloved. So if me and Peter have an argument about the dishes, and so we're fighting about the dishes and my feelings are getting hurt about the dishes, and I pause, if I have enough in me to pause.
Foresight or whatever.
Foresight, right. And I pause and I say, okay, this is stupid. We're fighting about the dishes or the dog or whatever. What is this really about? And I peel back the layers. From me, it's always that I am feeling unloved or I'm feeling unwanted. And knowing that that's how I perceive the world, it helps me make decisions, and it helps Peter make decisions about how I interact and how he needs to help me push through hard things. So,
which you really only do if you love somebody, because if you don't, or if you don't really care about that other person,
right.
you're not going to take those things into consideration at all. You're just going to, you know, I mean, I can put myself in a situation where, even in my own marriage, sometimes I know what I should say in context, but a lot of times I just run roughshod over that. But then it's afterwards where I'm like, I should have been A, B, or C,
right.
been more kind, been more loving, been more patient, been more, not said that, because that's really not who that person is.
Right.
You know?
Right. So I'm going to say those three again, and then I'm going to read something else. So your reconstructed past, that's part of your narrative, your inner narrative, your perceived present, and your imagined future. So reconstructed, perceived, and imagined are the three adjectives. And they suggest an adaptability, right? So when you look at those are subjective things. So,
well, hold on. Reconstructed past, perceived present,
and imagined future.
Imagined future.
So I'm going to use an example of something that happened recently over the Thanksgiving season. So, but what's great about that is that it is changeable. So we have the power, and this is from
to rewrite our story.
To rewrite our story, and we also are really blessed that we have the power of the gospel to also rewrite our story. And you can see that all through Scripture,
right?
Of how, you know, the woman at the well, you know, all the David, all the great patriarchs of the past, how they had these really rough narratives, and how God is able to rechange them. You know, Paul, the apostle, like, so we have that too. We also have the gospel. So I don't want to not negate that, but. So for me and my husband have been having a disagreement about a family member. I gave you guys the unfiltered version. You're going to get the filtered version here. Okay. So
the godly version.
The godly version. I went crazy before because I just needed to vent it out. So as you guys know, and all of our listeners know, I have no contact with my biological mother, and I don't have a lot of contact with my biological mother's family. I do have this one uncle, I'm not going to say his name, and he struggles with a lot of trauma, like everybody in my family does. We all struggle with trauma. And his way of dealing with trauma is alcoholism. And so he drinks a lot and too much. And so in our family, he is an uncle, but he's also kind of like a big brother. So he is only 9 years older than me. So my entire childhood, I grew up with him.
That's like me and Hannah.
Yeah. And I want to preface that in my childhood, he did some crazy weird stuff to me, like hang me out a window, put mice in my bed to wake me up. His pet mice. Not right.
That explains when you see a mouse
yes.
in my eaves and you're just like, there's a mouse.
Yes, it does. I have a serious phobia of mice because they used to crawl up my body when I was a little girl.
I hate birds.
But again, he was a little boy with not a lot of structure and he thought he was feral, and he thought that was funny. But he was also and I might get a little bit emotional because he did beautiful things for me. So when there was a snowstorm, he would build these huge forts that you could climb into, and he'd have candles. It was so big that he could have candles burning inside them. He'd like these igloos, and he'd set up snacks for me and take me in and like spend the whole day. We would spend all day.
How was this happening? Did you live near each other?
I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house. So he's my grandmother's son. And because I was so little, he was just a little bit older. So
you're
like
9 years younger than your grandmother's son?
Yeah.
my brain can't wrap around.
Okay, it's just a
that.
lot of teenage pregnancies. Just keep coming back to that.
Oh my gosh.
So when I was a little girl in kindergarten, he was Henry's age.
Nah.
So he was like in middle
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
And then when I was in
Something
middle school, he was in high school. And so he would he would take me and help me build these crazy forts, and we'd spend all day playing outside, and he would make he's brilliant in a lot of ways. He's brilliant. Or one time where my grandmother lived on the farm, there was a field, and the field was full of baby deer, and so he like came and found me and like got me all bundled up because it was cold in November, and he took me and we quietly on the 3-wheeler went out so I could see a field of baby deer. Some of the most beautiful memories are because of him. So I have this deep love for this man. However, he is very, very broken. And so what happens is he's kind of a recluse. He doesn't like to leave his home. And around the holidays, he will reach out to my sister and I and want us to connect with him. But his idea of connection is normally he is intoxicated. He starts talking at us. It's not a conversation. It's usually a lecture. And then if he asks us a question, or if I push back and say, I don't want to talk about that, or you sound inebriated and I don't want to talk to you, then it becomes ranting, and then like aggressive, and then usually I cut the conversation off, and that's when the text messages and the Facebook messages come, where he calls me horrible names, is incredibly abusive.
And this is on repeat?
It's a definite wash, rinse, repeat. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and then I don't hear from, I go silent. I don't hear from him. He never apologizes. And then he starts up the process again.
Like the next holiday season.
The next thing. And then he's like, you girls are my only thing I have left. I love you girls so much, meaning me and my sister. And why don't you girls call your uncle? And, you know, and then.
Have you seen the text thread?
Yeah,
recently?
right. And then,
yeah.
And then he's like, you guys know I don't mean that. You know, he'll justify, but he never says, I am sorry. He was, so
he doesn't remember a lot of it.
I don't think he remembers any of it.
Right. But
And
still
so
no excuse.
It
I'm
doesn't
sorry,
excuse because he can read, and it's right there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
when my grandmother was dying, he obviously was much more in our life because she was living at our home. She lived at his home while we were getting our home ready, and I was becoming power of attorney. And so that time was traumatic with him because he would show up, especially when she was near death, and he would scream at us. He would scream at me and my sister. He called me a murderer. I was being selfish. I was letting her die. It was really ugly. I found out later my kids all heard it upstairs, and it was very traumatic for them, even though they're all teenagers. It's not like they were littles, but it still was really wild for them. He wouldn't, and then he got so mad at us, he wouldn't speak to us at the funeral. He came blazing in, he blazed out. We actually, people, like you guys wanted to come to my grandmother's funeral. Other people my pastor wanted to come, and I was like, no one's allowed because I don't know what he's going to do. I didn't know if he was going to show up guns a-blazing, literally. I didn't know if he was going to come in and start screaming. Like, I didn't know. And so, anyway, this has been the cycle. So, I have decided in my own heart that I just have to go no contact. And Peter doesn't agree. And we have had a lot of vigorous fellowship over this.
Vigorous fellowship.
Love it.
And because, and the other night and early this morning, we decided, I've kind of figured it out, and it has to do with story. So when Peter sees and hears, he hears my uncle's rants. His mind, and because of his story, he sees this incredibly broken man. And he says to me all the time, you know that's not true. And Peter says, and I do believe him, I do believe Peter, that of all of my family, besides my grandmother who's passed, but my uncle loves me the deepest. Like, my uncle would literally do anything for me. Anything. Like, he would be the person I would have to go off someone and he would bury the body. Like, he's the guy. He's the guy. but like he'd do anything for me. And so for
Still,
Pete,
you think?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, and that's what Peter thinks too. And so and he's speaking out of deep pain and shame. These
Sure.
verbal assaults.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so what Peter's like, he's like, Amber, it's not me calling you these words. It's him. It's your uncle, and he doesn't have a filter, and he's
Kind of like consider the source.
right. And he even says
Let it go in one
like
and out the
he's
other.
got the emotional IQ of like a 6-year-old. It's like a 6-year-old throwing a tantrum, just using big boy words instead of little kid words. And I can hear that and receive what he's saying, and I don't think he's wrong. However, because of my story of being unwanted and unloved, I cannot differentiate those words. Like I can't, and I keep trying like to try to take it in, and my sister can do it a little bit better than me, but her story is a little bit different than mine with this side of the family. I can't. The weight of how much he loves me and how much he hurts me is so imbalanced that I can't do it. And it's different if it was like when he was sober or when he was lucid or whatever we want to call it. If he spent beautiful time with me,
Or
if he
apologized.
or if he was like, this is really bad, I'm going to go put myself in AA, or I'm going to try to find treatment, or even was just nice and stopped by when he was not intoxicated and like hung out with me and we played cards and played some cribbage and talked shop, or like
There's like his side of responsibility that's not happening.
Right.
And there's also your trauma-filled life that's
Right.
your reality
Right.
that you have to consider.
right. So how I've kind of decided to finish this, but all because of the story. So I just wanted to take that. So why am I, so it's crazy, right? Like my husband, who's very sane, healthy human, and me, very sane, healthy human, are looking at the same situation totally different. And the biggest reason is story. So my uncle, my reconstructed past. So my uncle, yes, there were some beautiful things, but he also was my first bully, right? So there's conflicted, so when he speaks to me as an adult and I'm an adult, I am receiving some of that feedback as that little girl he would hang out the window or put mice in their bed, right? So I'm reconstructing my past. That's the narrative in my head when he says those words. Peter doesn't have that.
Right.
So he hears his words and goes,
No, it's not his uncle.
right, and he's drunk, honey. He's drunk. Just let it go.
Yeah.
I can't, because I'm here seeing it through my reconstructed past. My perceived present. My perceived present is that he doesn't come when he's sober. He doesn't show me any affection except for on his terms, his way, at his time. That's not Peter's
Right.
interaction with him, because he doesn't have any skin in the game. It's my uncle, not his uncle, right? And my imagined future. When I think about having a future interaction with my uncle, part of the hard part is that I just see this wash, rinse, repeat happening over and
see the cycle.
over and over again, and the words and the way he talks to me and the cussing and you guys know I'm a girl that cusses once in a while, but this is vicious, vitriol words and language.
And sadly, typically, when people don't get help, things like that just escalate.
And that's what I feel like it's doing. It's starting to get worse and worse. And now with the death of my grandmother, having to relive her death every time by him saying I'm a selfish bada bada boo who murdered his mother is his new favorite.
That's
things
why
to yell
literally
at me.
only the gospel and only grace and things like really come in and stop people from a declining, escalating, sad future. Because unless you really want to turn your life around, I mean, some people are able to do it through AA, but still they defer to a higher power.
They do defer to
It
a higher
can't
power.
just really come from just you. Like
Right.
you're
There's no
going
such
to
thing as
continue to
cold
wallow.
turkey.
Right.
You're going to
Right.
continue to all the things.
The cycle. Well, that's
The
it, and
cycle.
that's his narrative, right? So
Yeah.
his narrative and my narrative
He's
are
getting
bumping.
old. He's getting.
They're a bumping.
They're a bumping. We're
Yeah.
bumper cars right now. His
Yeah.
narrative and my
I thought he was
narrative.
much older though. So he's
No.
He's only in his early 50s.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and
So
he's
I
had
just
a
feel
lot
like
of
this is
trauma
the
in his
behavior of
life.
someone who's like maybe in their like 80s.
Is he completely together mentally? Is he complete? Does he have all of his faculties when he's not, or is he like a? Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, he's an odd duck. He's always been an odd duck, but no, he's actually probably. I don't want to make the comparison because they're not, but like you know how my Thomas is brilliant
Mhm.
and like he's like, don't listen to this, and if you know Thomas, don't tell him this. Like he's off the charts brilliant in some ways, but it makes him kind of quirky in other social settings
Mhm.
because he doesn't think like other
Mhm.
he's literally thinking about when he's in this space how many knots are in the wood and what would that be, and
He's like a beautiful mind. Have
He
you ever
is-
seen that?
except Lord willing he doesn't go crazy. You know
Well,
what I mean?
right, but it's like they see the world in terms of numbers.
He-
Or,
and he's-
you
and-
know,
and
it's
so
like, yeah.
But he's fascinating and he's kind and he's loving and he's wonderful, Thomas. And but he is, you know, in some social setting, and if you embrace him as who he is, which his friends do, they love it about him. Like you never know what Thomas is going to say because you never know what he's thinking
Yeah,
because he's got entire.
yeah,
He's not one where there's crickets ever in his brain.
yeah.
And so my uncle is a lot like that. I think when he was a little boy, he is brilliant. He is brilliant in some ways, but he was raised in an incredibly traumatic situation. Bad, just like my mother had been. And so that trauma has skewed his emotional
Yeah, sure.
IQ
Capabilities, yeah.
and his ability. But out of all of my family, he's the only one who's honest about it, who says, I know I'm messed up. None of my other family, it's everybody else's fault. He will take culpability, but
So if all this is happening to you, when have you ever known him to do that?
when he is of sound mind and in my presence, he's amazing. He's funny.
Except
he's
for all
fun.
the times you just described.
Yeah. So when my
Yeah.
when my grandmother was ill, he would drink less because he was responsible for taking care of her.
Mm-hmm.
And so he loves my grandmother. She, you know, like he was a mama's boy for reals. And so he did the best that he could. He did an incredible job taking care of her. But in those little pockets of time, he would be able to show vulnerability. You know what I mean? Like he could. And so I do think he has all, I'm air quoting, he has all his faculties.
Ow.
However,
Myself.
he is self-medicating and he is wrestling with a lot of trauma that he's unwilling to. And so that's what Peter sees.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel the repercussion. And but what was so fascinating was when I stopped and peeled the layer, because I was so angry at Peter. I was like, you're picking him over me? And Peter's like, I don't think I'm doing that. But then when I was like, my uncle makes me feel so unwanted and unloved by his words. It triggers me so deeply that when he speaks to me, I go back to every traumatic situation of my childhood.
The feelings.
The feelings,
You feel
and
the
even in
same.
my brain.
Yeah.
Like every single time, I'm trying not to get emotional, that he calls me a murderer, I witness in my body and in my mind, my grandmother's last breaths. And watching that happen and feeling guilty that I can't save her. And it over and over and over again.
No, it's such an unkind. I can't imagine somebody. So I'm taking care of my grandmother in my own home, and then another relative comes in. Instead of thanking me for putting my grandmother in my living space and taking care of her and going through sleepless nights and all the things and loving her in this way, instead that person calls me a murderer in my own house.
Yeah.
That person wouldn't leave the house
And
in a whole piece.
well, and that's
you-
what that
somehow
night was
you-
rough.
I'm just saying, like
Yeah.
that is beyond unkind.
Yeah.
And
well,
that is there's no
Well, it's
words
messed
for
up.
that.
it is really messed up. And so I see the messed up part, and and Peter's able to see through the mess. And I for a while, this has been going on since Thanksgiving, this kind of vigorous fellowship and debate about this situation.
Is it because there's still text being sent?
Oh yeah.
No.
Oh yeah, every single time. Yeah, and then all sorts of things that we don't need to go into. But what is so interesting is that I was starting to now feel guilt and shame that I didn't see it Peter's way. And I started feeling judged by Peter's perspective on me. And so that was starting to affect our marriage, like in air quotes. Like we were still able to do life together. But I was like, I could feel bitterness and sadness in my own soul of like, he's a godly man. He loves the Lord. He's in the Word every day. And he is saying these things. And I can't even get there. I have got to be sinning somewhere. Where am I sinning in this that I can't see it his way? And basically it comes down to story, the narrative in my head, my internal narrative of being unwanted and unloved.
But then what?
So,
Yeah.
Right. So, for me, I have to change, right? So for me, I can't change that narrative, which has been my goal, as you guys know, for over a year and a half in trauma therapy, is to change this narrative. I can't change that narrative if the human being continues to say the things that my internal narrative says to me, right? Like
I
you
agree. I
can't.
have a situation like that in my own life.
Yeah, you can't. Like, how do you? It's like
move forward.
Yeah,
It's
like,
not a
how do you-
narrative. It's actually happening to you in
Right,
real time.
exactly,
You are
exactly.
being abused in real time. You are.
right, and so it's like being an alcoholic and working at a bar. Like that's not a kind place for you to keep your sobriety, slinging drinks for a living. Like that doesn't make sense. And so Peter and I were able finally to talk through it, and we have a meeting tonight to continue to talk through it. So this has been really helpful, this external processing for me, for my vigorous fellowship.
I've got a few things to say about it.
No, but it's okay. But what I've decided. So what I've decided to do.
Wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want them. I want to stay married. But
I've
no.
been in a similar situation.
Oh, okay. Well, so what I'm doing
And
is I've decided I'm writing him a note that I'll send to Messenger, acknowledging the beauty of who he is and how pivotal he was of showing me beauty in my life.
It was very gracious of you.
Because yet by the grace of God go I.
No, totally.
So
and you're offering maybe one last flickering candle.
I want when he gets angry at me and goes back and looks, he gets to read that over and over again. I want to tell him about the deer in the woods. I want to tell him about, when he used to make me fun snacks. I want to tell him about all the ways where, like, you love this. Like, he's super mechanically inclined, and back in the day, there was no such thing as 4-wheelers. There were 3-wheelers. And I always wanted to drive one, but they were so tippy. So he fixed the gears so that I could only make a right turn. And he took me in a field so that I could learn how to do it. Like, he just did that for me as like a 16-year-old boy. You know what I mean? For an 11-year-old or however old. I don't do maths. And so, I don't do maths.
Yeah, me neither.
So anyway, I want to tell him that.
Are you going to tell him the other part of it?
So then what I'm going to say is, that is that is the man and the person I want to remember.
Yeah.
And your anger and pain that you are feeling because of your life choices, things that have happened that are not your life choices, your sadness, your loneliness, and your grief, the way in which you show me that is abusive. And I can't keep doing it. I can't keep every 3 months having you call me, and I'm going to write out all the things. I'm going to take this shot, take the screenshots and do it verbatim. I can't keep doing this because you're making me, you're that's not who I want to love. I want to love my uncle up here and not this man. And so
it's also abusive, and I'm not going to allow myself to be staying in this situation.
Right.
So I'm
all
gonna
of those
block
things.
you,
So but I want you to know the reason I'm blocking you.
Right.
Is because I'm starting to
But with
forget
people like
that
man.
man.
Just
I'm
don't be
forgetting that
surprised.
man. Right. I don't care. I'm doing this for my own soul. I want to remember when I close my eyes and think about this man. I want to remember the man from my childhood when I was a little girl, or the man who bought a 3-piece suit to my wedding so he didn't want to embarrass me. like he was so nervous because he's, you know, a hick from, you know, the county, not from the county, but from, like, he's from the backwoods. And he was so nervous to come to my wedding, and he was so honored that he went and bought a suit.
Oh.
And the only, and so I want to remember that person,
Sure.
and I can't do that with all this vitriol.
It's so
So
hard.
I
when
am
it's so
blocking this.
tangled. It's
So I'm
tangled
blocking
up.
you
Yeah.
because I love you.
So you telling him what you're going to do.
Yeah,
the
I'm
action you're
gonna
say.
block you, and then Peter is going to take up the cross because he actually has a real heart for him.
Yeah.
Because and I said, awesome, tag, you're it.
Yeah.
So
That's
he's
really
gonna.
good. So you're not completely writing him off as
No,
a family.
no.
Peter's gonna still be.
He's gonna be a sounding board, and
That's wise.
and because of the way
Mhm.
Peter, his presence in the world, being the Clydesdale that he is,
Mhm.
my uncle is not at all abusive to
I was
Peter.
gonna say, is he gonna say the things he says to you to him
No,
about you?
absolutely-
no,
absolutely
Of course
not.
he's not
Absolutely
going
not.
to.
So anyway, that I just thought it was interesting, and I thought I'd love to challenge our listeners and you guys to, like, what do you think your story is that always comes creeping back up? Like you were talking a little bit about it with like Christmas and
Yeah.
like where and like how do we?
Well, the word that just came into my mind when I thought of you with this was that, especially as if you're handing off the communication to Peter, which I think is beautiful and a wonderful
So
thing.
wise.
And I did that a lot in the situation that I had to make a really hard boundary with somebody in my life. And
You have a ladybug crawling up your shoulder.
oh,
Um,
fine. Wonder, see how far she gets.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep going. Sorry.
Lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. That's my bad.
No. What came into my mind, oh, there she goes, was that you were an easy target.
oh, for sure.
And you know how when we were talking about narcissism way back in some of our episodes about narcissism and all this really hard, really sinister stuff, they know
Oh yeah.
when people are easy targets and that they can seduce, if you will, or groom, or and like literally change them. They know, they can tell. And so, and you're, for whatever reason, this person in your life sees you as an easy target. You would never dare send those things to most people. They would be like, excuse me? Who the bleepity bleep 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 do you think you are?
Right.
And that's my reaction to this person when he's doing this to you, is to be like,
Right.
how dare you? Like, first of all, you're not a little girl anymore. You're a grown woman.
Yeah.
And you're,
Did he ever talk to you like that when you were a little girl?
No.
but
not
he
that I
was
can
your
re- but
first bully.
He
Yeah.
was my first bully, like, but more like that kind of stuff, like not verbal, but like
Sibling stuff.
his sibling
Although
stuff.
my
Like,
sibling never dangled me out of a window and put mice in my bed. I mean, that's like
Again,
very Charles
My
Dickens.
siblings put poop in my bed. Moose poop
Gross.
was your poop on
Oh.
camping trips, you know. So, but I knew they loved me.
Right. It was, but it and I think, and again, there was so much angst in the home and so and
I mean, you came from such a dredgy, most miserable, abuse-filled life that was all fairly normal, and that was, you know, things
and
things
in
that were
fact,
major.
it feels normal that when you're like, when I started sharing it with Peter, and he was like, "What?" And because
It's
I
not
didn't even think to
normal.
share it because I'm like,
Right.
doesn't everybody's uncle hang them out the window and put mice in their bed? Oh no, okay.
But I mean,
oops.
I guess that is a little weird.
But and he sustained all the things.
Yeah.
But even the fact that he did as well
Doesn't excuse.
doesn't excuse, especially as we grow up and we hopefully mature. Some of the things we always will struggle with. I mean, and we're pretty vulnerable about that on here. Everybody knows I'm a hot mess, so it's like you're always going to struggle with a lot of the similar things. I think we'll all have tendencies, or like when we're pushed and when we're under pressure, our reactions will probably always be similar.
Right,
you
and
know?
that's the story. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like how we respond when we're under pressure, when we're at our weakest.
When you're being hurt.
Right, at all. Or even sometimes when you feel joy, like when we were talking, you were sharing about your friend, you know, like how like how children sometimes respond if they've had trauma in happy times too. Like it doesn't have to always be under, but when they're under some sort of dissonance in their normal routine, that story is what you need to start identifying in yourself. Like, who are you when you're your worst self? And take away everybody else's blame, because everybody has blame in it. Like, it's not, like your dad or my mom or somebody's brother or uncle or whatever it is. It doesn't matter how we respond. That story, that response is what I want, that I'm learning about myself. For me, what it always comes down to, in that moment, I am feeling unwanted and unloved. In that moment. And I either respond this way because of this trigger or that way because of that trigger. But I cannot rewrite my story. I cannot change that narrative if I don't identify what that is. What is the thing that you're describing? What is it? And I'm lucky enough that actually you guys helped me with the words of unwanted and unloved. But learning to identify it and understanding where it's coming from. And being able to flesh that out, because once you flesh it out, then you can change it.
What's yours?
I was trying to think about it right now, and the thing that comes to my mind is I am not enough.
Yes. Ooh,
Okay.
that's so good.
Have you said that before? I don't feel like you have.
I don't think I've ever heard her say that either.
It's just what came into mind just now. I was
Yeah.
like, unwanted and unloved is close.
Yeah.
It's close, but I was loved very well by some people and definitely wanted, but not necessarily just for me. I think a lot of times
That's
I was
the
wanted
enough
because I
part.
was needed,
Yes.
but not in a great way, not as you should be needed as a
Right.
child.
Right.
And I was a second mother, but my feeling always is I am not enough.
That is so good.
Yeah. If I
Can you see how that reflects on how you
it affects everything I do.
everything
And the
you do?
reason why I do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that insane? Like when you really start honing it in.
And my most favorite inner self is that I am enough.
Yes.
And that I am literally, my vision of heaven starts with like the first 100 years of me literally naked. And I don't know why, but
I know why. Keep
naked,
going.
curled up in the fetal position around Jesus's feet. And we're alone. Like, I'm just clinging to his feet. I'm completely stripped, because I think a lot of my life is judging and covering and trying to give the perception that I'm chill, but also got everything together at the same time, which don't really go together.
Well,
You
and your
can't, you
fear
can't be
of growing.
chill. You can't be super chill.
Well,
And
I
also
think
be
you're-
super put together. But I really try to be those things together. And if I'm not pulling it off, I'm not enough.
Right.
I'm
And
not
I think the
enough.
nakedness is also your aesthetic of being afraid to be old, being afraid to have.
Well, I've grown up. I mean, you said my first bully, and I was like, who was my first bully?
I know.
I can't say who
I
it
know.
is.
I know who it is. I know
The
who it
person who
is.
sat next to me in 5th grade and asked the teacher if he could be moved because of my elbows, which were covered in psoriasis.
Oh.
My whole body, when I was a child, I had just covered. I mean, literally, until 8 years ago when I, thank you, plexus, which is the missing link, but a lot of my body was covered in these hideous, scaly, bleeding, red sores. And my elbows are the one thing that's the hardest, because we think about the abuse your elbows sustain. They
in the
bump
type of skin.
and then touch
Yes.
clothing all day long. They're always leaning on stuff, bumping stuff. So anyway, those are the places where psoriasis always loves to be. All the places that are have abrasion. And I never knew that I was so ugly and repulsive until that moment, because I never had any friends growing up. We moved, we were nomadic. I moved 13 times before I was 8, and living in all sorts. And my family loved me without, like, I knew I had something wrong with my skin, because my mom and dad, even as a toddler, I remember doing treatments under ultraviolet light and tar baths and all these things, because they were like, what's wrong with her? And I had it on my face, and all the things. But it wasn't until a stranger
Mm-hmm.
said, "Ew, gross. Teacher, can I be moved? Her elbows are gross."
Mm.
And she moved him, that I felt so
Yeah.
hideous
Yeah.
and so less than and so not enough, and that marked
That marked
the
deal.
feeling
Mm-hmm.
that I felt about myself
Mhm.
forever.
Mm-hmm.
Forever. Just that one child, that
Mm-hmm.
one mean boy
Mm-hmm.
And it made you ultra
who never
sensitive.
talked to me again, by the way. Never once in his whole life. We were in the same class for years. We graduated together from high school. Never spoke to me. I was too gross. I was too covered in sores.
Crazy.
And it,
I have so many words. See, I'm getting all aggressive for this one because
right,
I do
you
know.
get aggressive when it's not you.
I
I
know.
get aggressive when it's you.
I know.
And it's the same kind of feelings,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but like,
The formative years too. There's such
Yeah.
formative years.
Well, and
Oh
but
my
I think
gosh.
that's why you're
Yeah.
naked, and I think it's also like you put so much pressure on yourself. Now that I think that fits you perfect. That is a perfect narrative that you're. I mean, it doesn't fit you perfect. We'll work through it, but you know what I mean. Like, but that's such a great sum of like.
Yes, wear that.
well, we've got another 10 years of podcast coming up, guys.
Well, we just meaning
All
like
therapy.
why you're anxious about your weight all the time, why you're always giving yourself such a hard time about your hair or your body or the way you dress or the way your house is, or like it like your narrative starts to infiltrate to a cellular level
Mhm.
how you respond and move through the world.
And I'm judging myself. I don't even need other people to judge me.
Oh,
yeah.
I judge myself enough.
Well, because it's
You're
in
your
there.
harshest critic.
Yeah.
It's in there.
And most people are.
Right,
About
and-
something.
Mhm.
It might not be this. Like, this is
For
my
sure.
particular struggle
sure.
because
Oh,
I'm visual and all
Yeah.
the things. But
I literally believe
yeah.
even my like I have to verbally say to myself, remember, Rachel loves you. Remember, Amy loves you. Remember, Peter loves you. Remember, before I say things to people that might be a little bit harder or won't be just glazy compliments. Like if I'm actually giving my feelings about something, even if it's positive, I have to it's getting less, but I have to chant to myself, remember, this person loves you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm
Remember they're
literally
safe, remember they're okay.
I'm literally just waiting for the shoe to drop for you or Peter to be like, all right, I'm done. This was a good run,
We had a good run.
but I'm out.
Good run.
We had a good run, but I'm out. And so yes,
35 years down the tubes.
down the tubes. But like
Yeah.
that's why in the former podcast I said I'm horrible at small talk. Like I don't know how to talk to people because I just know they hate my guts. So why am I going to start talking to people? And so
And if I'm around a beautiful woman who's successful and has a beautiful home, I feel literally like nothing and nobody.
yeah,
Yeah.
invisible.
No, worse than invisible.
Like seen in all the awfulness.
Yeah, like I'm failing, and here's all the ways why, and I'm not worthy to be in the same room with you, and just less than, not enough. All the things where it's just like you're not enough, just as you are, and that is why I have always loved the gospel. Like I love the Lord, because I feel like I've never felt judged by Jesus.
So good.
I only feel judged by myself and humans,
Mm-hmm.
or my perceived judging by humans. I don't think anyone's ever really felt that way. Although a few people have said things like, I don't know, you don't spend any time on your house because it's always perfect. I was like, the only reason why my house looks this way is because I spend so much time
Yeah.
doing things.
Right,
and
right.
all-
But that's that
not-
grooming thing. That's the same thing. Like you, people who are insecure about certain things, they look and they're like, like it's like a radar. They're like, ooh, this, you're triggering their inner narrative. And so their insecurity, and so they're gonna bang back. Just like I same thing happens to me. Like somehow people, when they're having a hard day, I somehow enter into their presence, and then I get the what, like I get the verbal bashing, which only, it's like radar. It's like bad, painful
well, the
people.
easy target.
Yeah, we just become
Right. Now, I used to be more of a person that could be groomed by a very bad person, and I am no longer that. Now I can sense that coming from a mile away, and I will turn and face it, and I will tell you what it's like. So, and men, you know, a lot of my traumas that I've sustained over the years has involved very bad men, and so I can smell those men from a mile away, and I literally have zero tolerance
Yep, same.
for
Except mine are women.
right.
I do not enjoy. I mean, if you're an older woman, don't take it personally, but I don't feel comfortable in a space of like women Bible studies are the hardest for me.
Well, when your abuser is your mom, like
Yeah,
that's-
so it's like it all.
it makes
But again,
sense.
right? It all goes back to my story.
Well, I don't enjoy being in big groups of women, and I don't have any childhood trauma in that sense, but I think our reason for me is I was raised with all boys, and they kind of like say it like it is. Whereas I think women, our struggle as a whole, I think where Satan gets us as a whole is insecurity
Mhm.
and comparison.
Yeah.
And what we do, like you said, how you hone in. If I see something about you that I think's better than me or more beautiful than me, what's our first reaction typically is to be snarky or to say something or do something that will just put you down just a little bit. That will take you down just a little
Take
bit
you
of a
down
peg.
a peg.
Yeah,
Yes.
to lift myself up a little
Yep.
bit. I think that's what we as women do. And I think it's where Satan gets us, because I also think that there is like we had a team call last night with our Plexus team, and like what we do in this podcast, like when one person lets down their walls, we are a force to be reckoned with when we come together and when we
Right.
share our vulnerabilities together.
Right.
But we have to get past the petty insecurities first, and sometimes it doesn't happen, but when it happens, it's beautiful. It's amazing.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? And so that's what happened last night with one of our team calls. Our leaders, there's a lot of pain happening, and so we called it was like a business meeting, but it was really like a pulse check on our hearts, like how is everybody doing, and everybody shared how they were doing, and everybody's struggling. But it all made us like fall in love with each other. You know, like okay, you know, it's just so much bigger than making money.
Right.
You know,
That's the difference though, and that's why I think this is one of the reasons why I still want to keep doing this, and because I was like I could do this more, even because I think there's so many people. I think everyone. I mean, we get enough feedback to know that everyone struggles.
Yeah. Oh,
with
my word,
that
yeah.
If you really sat down and looked in someone's eye and said, "I'm not leaving this cup of coffee. We're gonna keep pouring the coffee until you say one way in which you're really struggling. How can I pray for you?" Or like, or just be willing to be the one that's saying, "These are all the ways that I'm really struggling." Typically, people will be like, "I know, me too. I A, B, or C, or this with my family, or this with my job, or this with my health, or this with my fear of death, or this with my faith." And there's something that's shaky, that feels
and if there's not in that moment, there will be. You'll have your turn.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think when
Yeah.
you see those things and when you walk into those hard things, being aware of your narrative and how that's going to shape your walking through the hard thing. Like
That's tough because like I tend to not be aware of a whole lot of things. I'm so reactionary.
right.
I don't love that in other people, but I like I'll even say like that was reactionary leadership, or that was reactionary whatever. That is one of my biggest pet peeves. It's one thing if you're not a leader, you can be reactionary. If you're a leader and you're reactionary,
I should just love you.
that is not okay.
Well, and that's what.
Why are you two laughing like that?
Because you're one of the most reactionary human beings.
But not when
ever.
it comes to leadership. Really?
I don't know. I don't. I'm not under your leadership. So I can't-
Let's throw that out of your leadership either.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
Right. I'm not. So I'm not
Maybe it's a
speaking.
lot more podcasts, but
I know. I'm not speaking into that because that's.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying,
Ooh.
like, I just think it's hysterical. I just think it's because you are
I
reactionary.
am so reactionary, and
So it's cute. It's cute. It's cute and adorable, not cute.
When you did
haha.
this, you know that expression, I'm like, oh, that's me all day and night. When one finger's pointing at somebody else, there's three pointing back at you. I'm like, how often do I do that? I can't believe you. Oh, wait, okay.
Yes.
Oh, ye old wooden ship.
Ye old-
in my eye.
Ye old-
If you need to go back to an episode, that's the one
Oh
to
my
do.
gosh,
But
that one made me. What ship?
Well,
ship. I think she means plank.
I mean, it's kind of like that Jewel song. Can we have a moment where she's just like, do you hate it because it's pieces of you?
Yes.
Oh, it's good.
Have you ever heard that song?
No, I like it when it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
Yeah. Tay-Tay.
No, it's a very old song by Jewel when she was really, really big, and it's
Yes.
all these
Pieces
things
of
about
you.
do you hate, and one of them is like you're an ugly girl, blah blah blah, blah. Do you hate her because she's pieces of you, and all this thing.
Oh,
It's
so
very-
good.
It gets into the crust of it all.
Yes.
And
The
I
crust.
always felt that song deeply, and
That's so
I
good.
feel like it's the rawest,
Mm-hmm.
realist, especially for women.
For
Where we're
women.
like, I
Mhm.
hate that girl because she's prettier than me.
Mm-hmm.
That girl's literally probably looking at you being like, I hate that girl because she's better at this than me. Like
Mhm.
no one's ever
Or prettier than you. Like we
Mhm.
don't see.
we don't even see each other
Right.
the same way. So
Mhm.
someone's like, oh, my nose is so big, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got the most beautiful nose.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's how we're all wired. If you have dark hair, you want light hair.
It's
If you
so
want curly hair,
true.
you want
It's
straight hair.
so
If you want
true.
to be thick and stocky and athletic, then you're going to be real thin. And if you're that, then you want to be real thin. And it's all
Yeah.
these it's all
I love freckles. I have like 2.
If Emma could share.
I
she
know.
would.
She knows how much I love her freckles.
Yeah, so so anyway, I think
good.
that is the thing, is that when we are, whatever those insecurities are,
Mhm.
when we are able to find them, I think that is where the meat grows, right? You
Where the meat
find
grows.
it,
for the meat grows,
you
people.
find it, and then you're able to understand it. So for
Mhm.
me, obviously the last year and a half, I've been working on finding it. What really happened, and sitting in
Mhm.
the pain and the suffering that was my childhood, and sitting in the pain and suffering that was and the sadness. Like I said in one of my podcasts about my therapist, like my therapist was the first adult that would say, "Oh, that's so tragic."
Mhm.
Like I always wanted to justify it or move on or pick up those bootstraps and just keep
Mhm.
going, or it's not as bad as a child in Ukraine right now, or it's not
Mhm.
as bad as
Right.
the little girl that was stuck in a closet chained to a door. Like I always tried to justify it, and I never sat in the sadness that was, and being able to sit in the sadness of what was and understand that has formed me to a cellular level, that I feel unwanted and unloved.
Mhm.
And that affects how I raise my kids. It affects how I live in my marriage. It affects my relationship with God. It affects my relationship with friends. It affects the way I look at who I am.
Mhm.
When the vision I look on in the mirror,
Mhm.
it affects how I look at other people and their children and all of these things.
And that's like the sad part, because when we get stuck and we get circular in like what the world and what that's also human. Everything you just described is only coming from humans.
Mhm.
And then there's God, what God says you are.
right.
Well, I
And
was
we
thinking
don't-
when you said your narrative is I'm not enough, Allie B. Stuckey wrote a book that says you're not enough, and that's okay. Because we're not, but apart from the Lord, but when the Lord comes into the game, when he comes into the picture, he rewrites our narrative. He rewrites our story.
Right.
And because of him, you are enough. Because of
Mhm.
him,
Because he's enough.
you are worthy and loved.
Right.
Because of him, my worth is not in what I do and accomplish, it's in what
Right.
he did. Doesn't matter what I do.
And who
Right.
he
And
says
who
you
he
are.
says we are.
Right. And that is
So-
that's that fourth piece, which is the gospel, right? Like that
The piece.
that is
Yeah.
the piece.
It's the piece that makes everything else, you can wipe it clean.
Mhm.
And just being like, I'm going to try again today to live in who God says I am.
Right. Now, that's true, but I do still think we should do the work.
Oh, no. It's so
Absolutely.
Because I think sometimes in
Absolutely.
I have
Christian
to just make sure
culture-
that it's both.
Right, you have to hold both in your hands.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think in Christendom, I like to use that word of Christian culture, we are scared of psychology. We're scared of therapy. It's getting better. I will say I definitely see a
Definitely,
change.
yeah.
But because they do want to say, well, you're saved, so everything's okay
Sure.
now.
Mhm.
We still have that cellular narrative,
Oh my
and we
gosh,
are going to
yes.
be
It's
sanctified.
always the struggle.
But we
We have to
can
work,
help.
for
We
sure.
have to do our work, and
Mhm.
that is what helps us get sanctified. Even that's the best part. What
But
helps
we
us
work
get
out our salvation with fear and trembling.
Yes.
We have a part to play.
Mhm.
And
And we're
so-
not victims. We are more
No.
than conquerors.
We're more than conquerors, and so learning what our narrative is. So I guess that's what I kind
So
of
when you write your letter, going back to that.
yes.
Because I kind of cut you off there and we went deep.
It's a snow day.
I kind of love it actually.
Me too.
Whenever they're together, it makes them feel little again.
Yeah, they have like little.
Only
Thomas
when they're
literally
Holy and giggly.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you that Thomas was so excited. He does homeschool and he had an online class, so they came a little later, and he was like, "Mom, this is my chance for us to go snowboarding down. They like to take sleds and like
Down the hill.
He's like, we only get to do it once a year now that we're bigger, and so that is what he's been waiting for.
He's trying to get the snowmobiles working. He's like, and then they can all come over. We'll pull the
Sleds,
behind.
yeah.
And I was
Oh
like,
gosh.
takes a while to jump them first time, but
More power to you, you can.
yeah.
So your uncle. So when you write this, is this your decision? Like this is your decision, or you're waiting for one more communication?
Oh no, I'm
This
done.
is
No,
like
this is
you're
it.
declaring. This is a declaration.
Yeah, this is a
and I'm
yeah.
handing off.
And so you and Peter have had vigorous fellowship,
Yeah.
but he's
I think so. I think he hears me.
Mhm.
I think it's hard for him to see how much I struggle because he just loves me so big, and he does not like Peter struggles with his own stuff. He obviously has his own story and narrative, but taking thing, and maybe it's almost part of his story, is like I take in everything people says, and
Mhm.
his surviving mechanism was to never take anything in.
let it go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah,
Instead of the
and
source.
that is
Yeah.
his,
Mhm.
and so it's really hard for him to see why this bothers me so much. Not because of the words, like I'm not saying like he thinks that
Yeah.
what my uncle is saying to me is okay.
That's okay.
He doesn't, but he looks at me and he's like, it's like some it's like a 6-year-old throwing a tantrum. Like he
Yeah.
would never take a tantrum from a 6-year-old personally.
It's not
How
like
can
that
it-
at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but we have similar trauma.
Mhm.
He doesn't have that, and and that's often where our vigorous fellowship bumps. Is
Yeah,
that
sure.
he lives a life
Mm-hmm.
as this big strapping man.
But I think that's the best reason why he's taking
Oh,
the
yeah.
baton
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and running with it.
And
And,
that's what
you're
I'm-
saying, this is my boundary
Yeah.
because of my past.
Yeah.
And because I will no longer allow myself to be treated this way by this person
Right.
ever again.
Right.
And that if that happens, you defer instantly to him.
Well,
And
he
he
won't.
deals with it.
He won't be able. Like his
I'm just
only way
saying,
of
sometimes they find a
communication.
way.
They might. He might, and he may. But I think the hard part for me is when I remove myself from it.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I see it and I put it on my Peter hat, I know what I'm about to do is going to crush my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Because and I'm not saying it's okay. I love that she's like whatever.
I,
But
I'm
I know.
shrugging because it's it's a systematic problem that is
Mhm.
only going to get worse, and they are not going to stop.
Right, and I agree 100%.
Yeah.
But I also know he is
Yeah.
damaged.
But it's good you see the
Sad.
weightiness of it.
Right, I see the
think you're
weightiness,
not-
so
you're
I
not-
want.
This is
cut
my
and
love shrug
run.
for you.
Yeah.
This is my part that I get to play for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
right.
I do get to be like,
I know.
these are choices that you've made
Right,
Mhm.
and I
and seen.
and
But I
right.
like that you see the weightiness.
I
of
see
it.
the weightiness, and I want
No, it's
when
so
he's
weighty.
in the perils of a drunken stupor or a rant or loneliness or whatever, and he picks up that what he sees is when he rereads my letter, that it is always over and over and over again. I'm doing this because you're hurting me, and that's not who I love. And so I'm going to stop this now, so that when I think of you, I think of that man, that little boy, the boy, that man that bought the suit. That is the man that I think about, not this vicious, vitriol abuser. And
so good. It's very sweet and gracious. Again, I mean, like, because you could just let this be like what it is and not think about that. But
because my hope is,
yeah.
my hope is he does find rock bottom before he drinks himself to death. Like my hope is, and that when he gets to rock bottom, he does get help. And when he does get help, he finds Jesus. And when he finds Jesus, he's a renewed person. And he is able to feel the grace and love and compassion that I get to feel. Because guys,
Would you let him back into it?
absolutely, with joy. I would throw a party like the prodigal son. I would throw a party. We would have a pig roast. Everyone's welcome. I'd buy him a ring. We would just do it up big. Because because
That's great.
I truly
Yeah, that's so
believe
good.
in my heart, if I hadn't started going to dinner at your house, Rach, my path would look exactly like his.
Mm-hmm.
I have often thought that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same thing about my mother, like when I think about my mother, and because systematic abuse is systematic abuse,
Mhm.
and it is a
It just
miracle.
Mm-hmm.
It is
from
I am a miracle
Mhm.
because I am the first
That's your
woman.
new story. That's your new line.
Right,
I am a miracle.
I'm a miracle because I'm the first woman in my family in 6 generations that didn't have a child out of wedlock in her teens. I am the first person to get a 4-year college degree. I was the first person to stay married to the first man she married, the first man. Period. I only have had one marriage, and because I was able to do it, my sister quickly behind my heels was able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So my sister's even surpassed me. She got a master's degree,
Mhm.
but I think it's because I broke it. Like I broke.
The
I
cycle.
started
Generational
breaking it,
curse.
and then she comes in behind me and breaks it.
Mhm.
And so even though, and the only reason I broke it was Jesus.
Mhm.
The only reason I broke it was Jesus. And so all I can do is pray that somebody else that people in my family can break it too.
Mhm.
Well, then, I mean, I even just now, like, my prayer for your uncle is just that he finds the Lord, and that instead of escalating or spiraling, which are usually things that happen when someone's in a situation like his,
Mhm.
and he's just getting older, that he finds the Lord and that he has a whole new life
Mhm.
that he gets to live in a totally different way for totally different reasons with a
It'd be
totally
beautiful.
different outcome.
Yeah, it would be a miracle, and it would be wonderful.
Oh, and you hear redemption stories like that all the time.
Yeah, I do, and
Mhm.
and so but I want and again, this is a thing that, like, I wish I was a theologian. This is the only time I wish I was a theologian. Other times I just think whatever. But this is the one thing, like, I wish I could do the research. I wish I had the education to really dive into scripture and psychology and find in what is biblical boundaries, right? Because that is where this kind of buffers, right? Because for Peter, his boundaries are very different with my uncle than mine. And so I could put a lot of shame and guilt into what is happening, right? Like, how many times are you supposed to forgive? 70 times 7. Like, I can think, I can rationalize Peter's point of view
Well,
and
is he
make
a
my
believer?
no, and that's the thing. But still, like, I think that Christians
turn the other cheek and all the things.
blah
love
blah
your
blah
enemies,
blah
give
blah.
them water, all the
Right.
things.
Yeah. And
right.
so, like,
But
so how do you have?
yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
for my own soul, I want
You have
to.
not completely cut him off. You didn't cut him off.
Right.
You've handed him to Peter, who's part of you.
Yes.
And Peter can still love him well.
Yeah.
And you've left the door wide open for, if and when this changes, I will welcome you back with open arms, and I love you deeply.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we love our enemies and we turn the other cheek, but we don't stay and say,
Right.
please continue abusing.
Are you having fun to be
Right. And that's the thing. If I was ever to write a book besides my autobiography, would be about how to live in how to have good boundaries in complicated relationships.
Yes.
You can write 2 books, I'm writing about 7 right now.
Yeah.
I know, but I just need to get one.
There's a book out right now. What's the lady's name? She was a pastor's wife. I'm going to say the name wrong. He had multiple affairs on her, repented, came back, then did it again. And so finally, she's ended it. And it's good boundaries and goodbyes, or boundaries and something. But basically there does come a time when it's like, okay, because otherwise it's cyclical abuse.
Yeah.
And then you become an enabler.
Right. Now
if
you're
you have
giving your
children-
pearls to swine.
Yeah.
Right.
yes.
If you have children, you're showing them that they have to put up with this.
Yeah.
No.
Right. And I
You
think
don't want
that's
that kind of situation for them.
no, and that's the thing, and that is what I think.
Right, if this was your daughter in this situation, what advice would you
And
give
that
to her?
right, and that's I think I actually said that to Peter,
Right.
and he's like, well, Peter doesn't work well with those because he's too smart. He's too much like Thomas. He's like, well, it's not the same situation. There wouldn't be that. Like he could. I was like,
It's
you
not
know
the
what I
same
mean?
situation that he can handle it and you can't.
Right.
That's not the same situation.
Right, and that's where he has come to. That is where it came to. Was like,
And that's very good and very healthy and still gracious and still kind, but still good boundaries for you and hope for him and all the things.
yes. So anyway, So next time I'll talk about how do we change our narrative. But first, everyone's got to find it. So have fun, guys.
Do you have a how do we change our narrative plan? Oh,
Yeah.
shut it off. Shut her down.
Shut her down. I do.
What time we got? Where we at? Should we do it? Why do I have only 7% battery remaining?
I have like a terrible gas bubble in my lower regions. It's because I'm sitting so much.